Heard on Thursdays with Nikki is about to go live online. Catch HOT, the iconic radio show that made Philippine FM radio talk, every Thursday on the Monster.
Streaming video on the Monster Facebook page at RX931, the Monster YouTube channel at RX931, and twitch.tv/Monster RX931.
You heard on Thursday's host, Nikki Porter. Stand by and enjoy the program.
Hey, monsters, good evening. Time for more hot conversations here on Heard on Thursdays. My name is Nikki Porter, your host this evening on The Monster. Now, if you haven't noticed, you guys, it's been a very erratic season with, it's both very hot and very rainy at the same time. Well, they have their intervals anyway, but sometimes it's just so unpredictable that one day it's just there's a deluge, there's a downpour of rain on a random day, and then in the middle of it, it's all sunny, but then extra warm, extra hot, and then extra humid pa. It's wild. Like, our weather has been wild, but then what does this all mean? What is the bigger picture of this, right? Well, maybe one of the buzzwords that can relate to our weather and the changing climate is, of course, climate change, right? We've seen it in nature shows, like talking about different environments and how it affects, the natural habitat of different animals, so to speak, but also how it affects human beings, in our own environment, and how we are impacting. We are kind of like the number one contributors, right, of climate change or of global warming as well. And so there's so much news and content that you can find on the internet about how close we are, how narrow that window is closing, and how we can try and subvert, is that the word, or curb or lessen or prevent maybe the effects of climate change. So maybe we need to know more information and not be afraid of talking about it instead, because it has been talked about for decades already, and yet we don't see that much change going on about it, especially maybe on a local level as well. So to shed light on climate change and how we might be able to help save Mother Nature, our planet, lessen our impact on global warming, our guest is climate journalist and environmental advocate Lou Albano. So Lou is a Filipino writer and editor who now finds herself at the intersection of climate journalism and pretty much everything else. She is currently working as a managing editor at a popular online publication, and she is keen to cover the connection between consumption, health, food, lifestyle, travel, and climate, of course. Lou is the only member of the second cohort of the Oxford Climate Journalism Network, and she is also a fellow in the 2022 Executive Leadership Program of the Asian American Journalists Association, and is fresh from the pilot boot camp run of international media support and UNESCO's environmental and climate change reporting. So it has been her advocacy to share news and share, her knowledge and bring awareness to people so that they can actively care for planet Earth and hopefully do her part and do her civic action and due diligence in trying to make the world a better place and more livable, right? So without further ado, let's welcome to the show on Heard on Thursdays, Lou Albano. Hey!
Hi, happy to be here.
Hi, Lou. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. So, climate journalism, I've never heard of that actually up until when I read about you,
Yeah.
actually. So, climate journalism, how did you come about that? Has it something that you have thought about doing for years now, or was this something that was more recent?
Very recent. I didn't think I I didn't think there was a career actually like climate journalism. But in the pandemic, my boss knew how much I was a planet Earth stan. So so he asked me, did I want to take a lead in creating digital documentary series for Planet Earth and climate and environment. So I said yes, and then that's when it all happened. Initially, I was really with lifestyle. I was doing a
Mhm.
lot of I was in magazines, I was in
Mhm.
general interest websites. So that was really where I was. So this pivot is new and surprising, but oddly satisfying.
That's good. I love that. And I'm glad you came across that also. I mean, of course, during the pandemic, a lot of people discovered new things about themselves and new things that they didn't know that existed and that they now enjoy. So yours is climate journalism. Now it was mentioned that you're the only Filipino member of the second cohort of the Oxford Climate Journalism Network. So what does that mean and what does that entail?
That's really just bragging rights, Nikki. I don't know. I asked them what it was, what it meant, but really, I think just that there weren't that many people that from the Philippines that applied. But
Mm.
of course, knowing that during the whole 6 months, during the whole semester, I felt like I needed to not to be good at it, or at least not bring shame because I was the only Filipino there.
Sure.
At least, yeah, represented a little bit good, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And so, well, I mean, at least, well, the word network is there. So are you connected with people from all over the world who also have like that common goal of being a climate journalist? And do you guys keep tabs on each other with like sending each other stuff? Siguro may group chat ba kayo?
Yeah, may group chat kami. And then we also have like a little social network among the network.
Great.
So that's where we send tips, or if there are opportunities, that's where I send my stories for critique, just to make sure, because I'm so new at this. So just to make sure I'm getting it
Oh.
correct, because they're really like so smart, and they know all about this, and they're really the serious climate journalists.
Yeah, and for I think in this part of the world because we are well, Philippines is a developing country and we are also one of those places where people have, build their factories and everything. The concept of climate change, it's like still slow. I feel like it's still slowly building into like or gaining traction pa because like in other countries developed, they have the means, their
Mm.
they have a strategy for it. So it's good. It's nice to be connected to those people. Look, I'm assuming you're connected to those people. Nakasabing Oxford eh. Diba?
Pero walang
So
diploma, ha.
okay lang yun. But in any case, it's like it's good to have that network and that community of people, of like-minded people
Mm.
towards a similar goal. So there's this boot camp that was also mentioned, like the International Media Support Environmental Climate Change Reporting Boot Camp. Is this
Mm.
to train you how to be a better journalist in terms of climate change? Is there like a template or a formula, or are there pillars that you need to uphold for climate journalism?
Um, it's yes, it is like a training to help us become better reporters when reporting about in the environment and climate change. Unlike Oxford Climate Journalism Network, where it was like centered on the science, so every session we were reading studies, journals, whatever. This is really the boot camp was really very practical and very yeah, I guess practical is the word. So,
Mhm.
with regard to the pillar or the templates, uh, it was very like they're very aware of the news avoidance that people have, of the climate anxiety that people feel whenever they read about all
Mm.
these doomsday scenarios. So, the very important thing that they really ingrained in us was to always put solutions to our stories. So it cannot just be about doomsday,
Yeah,
doomerism. So it really
right.
has, you really have to show, solutions, but also to be critical about those solutions. So it can't be all just, tree hugging, advocacy, yada, yada,
Mhm.
yada, happy, happy, joy, joy. It's really about being critical also about those solutions. So it's
Mm.
pretty, it's cool. We I learned a lot from others. So it was a Southeast Asian from the region,
Mhm.
and while correct, we ours like what you said was correct. We are not as developed as the other nations when it comes to climate change or climate reporting. However, I feel like we are in the forefront of we are in the forefront of climate change. We might not be as developed, but we already know it. We just don't have the vocabulary.
Mm,
So
okay.
at the boot camp, we were all just sharing stories, and the region Southeast Asia is really at the forefront of it. So we get all the typhoons, we get all the sea level rise.
Mhm.
It's, you name it, environmental degradation. Everybody has it there. People from
Wow.
Malaysia, Indonesia, etc.
It's a good
So
thing you pointed that out. We bear the brunt of like the repercussions of like climate change. We're right there. And
mm,
that's so true too. And it's a good point also that you mentioned about like we just don't have the vocabulary for it, but we do know that there is such a thing as climate change. So at least we
yeah.
have at least there's a good start to that.
Mm.
So like you've written for many publications, mostly as a lifestyle writer. So, how did this or did this at all help you transition to learn how to write about climate change? Because I know there's a lot of papers on climate change, different studies, research paper, dissertations, et cetera, even articles also. So, and it's always very serious. And so, does the reporting really have to be serious, or can it be a little bit more casual in the delivery of it? With you as a lifestyle writer transitioning into like a climate journalist.
Number one, it's so hard. Like, so when I was like, I went into journalism. I went into, communication, because I didn't want to handle any sciences or maths.
Hmm.
So the wh- this time we're always just reading papers,
Mm.
research papers, journal entries. So that's tough. However, I feel like um, my training or my background in lifestyle really allowed me to crystallize all these scientific jargon to what it really means in our lives.
Hmm.
So in the food we eat, how we live, our consumption, it really just allowed me to see the science in a very practical manner, and also to communicate the science in a very practical manner.
Yeah.
When I was interviewing with Oxford, I told them I felt like a fish out of water,
Hmm.
because that is not my training at all. But they told me they needed more people with my background in lifestyle, because that's where the work really has to be done. More often than not, the serious climate journalists are really, it's almost like preaching to the choir. You
Mm.
know, sila lang nag-uusap.
Yeah.
Pero because I'm from a different, I don't know, training with
Hmm.
different background, then at least I'm able to say the science, give the science to another group of people.
Yeah. And
So
yeah, it's like the marriage of the two. It's like, being a lifestyle writer and then being a climate journalist because you can, I don't know, I guess speak the language of the common man instead of like,
yeah,
like actual climate change
doesn't mean
researcher.
it doesn't mean it doesn't mean you're watering it down. It's just you're
Yeah.
just making it. You're telling them, this is how it is. This is
Yeah.
how
And
it's going to affect your life.
yeah, you're making it more digestible, I guess, for people who would otherwise not read like those otherwise serious papers about
Correct.
climate change.
Correct.
Yeah. So now let's try and break down like a couple terms that we hear when it comes to climate change and the warming of the earth and everything like that, because for some of us, yes, we've heard of it, but then it's like, well, what is it really? Maybe some of us don't understand the concept of it. So one of the main reasons for global warming, if not the main reason of global warming, is carbon emissions, the amount of carbon emissions like humans, mostly humans, I guess, produce. So could you, Lou, explain to us what carbon emissions mean?
Um, okay. Mainly, it's about when you release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So it's almost like pollution. When you turn on your car, and then in the exhaust, that's emitting carbon, right? So
Hmm.
um, to be scientific about it, it's It's carbon because it's a carbon compound. So carbon
Mm.
dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, etc. These are greenhouse gases, and greenhouse gases is what warms up the atmosphere. It's what warms up the globe.
Mm-hmm.
So that is why the focus really is the focus of mitigating climate change is in bringing down the emissions, because we are not aware of how our entire lives, the entire our society, even humanity is our current modern lives is really based on fossil fuels and
Mm-hmm.
carbon emissions.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, okay, and funny story, I just learned how to do an emissions testing for my car, and for the longest time, I had no idea. I was like, for to register the car, but then
Mm.
when I was there, I was like, and I was looking at like the tarp. There's usually a tarp and tables and everything. Like there's like this threshold that it shouldn't go over and everything. And I finally understood it, and I was like, "Oh, okay." So it's it. I mean, in a more mechanical level, it's like to see if your car is like healthy. But then in the
Mm.
bigger picture, it's really just like, is it emitting like too much, like
Yeah.
carbon? I guess. So yeah, that's
Yes.
when I was like, "Oh, okay." It was like a whole mind
Correct.
blown moment. So for any
Application.
yeah, for anybody who doesn't know emission testing, that's why you need it also. It's to know how much carbon you are emitting in the world individually, right? So uh the term also, there's another term called net zero, and I've heard this being mentioned in world forums, I've heard it in documentaries. Even Formula 1 has this campaign, Road to Net Zero in 2030. So what does net zero mean in terms of carbon emission?
So the confusion really is when people think when you say net zero, it means zero carbon emission, but that's not really the case because it's impossible not
Mm-hmm,
to
mm-hmm.
emit carbon.
Yeah.
So net zero really, based on the 2015 Paris Agreement, right? So the Paris Agreement has, in 2015, some 196 nations agreed in Paris that we will limit global warming under 2 degrees Celsius. Better if it's 1.5
Mm-hmm.
Celsius. So to reach that goal, it's important to achieve net zero by 2050. So so that's where the whole thing is. So you have, um, what nations need to do, what countries need to do is try to bring down their emissions. So for instance, in the Philippines, how can we do that? um,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing I've thought of was really to fix our public transport system. So
Mm-hmm.
with better public transport, then there will be less cars in the road, so that less emissions,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. Yeah.
So so when nations are able to tweak their emissions, and then the remainder of that, for instance, 100 tons of carbon are being emitted. After we've fixed our public transportation, there's 50 tons left, and you
Mm.
cannot do anything about the 50 tons anymore. So what do? So then you try to plant trees. You try to
Mm.
sequester the carbon. So it's not
Ah.
about removing the remaining 50. It's just about offsetting, because we know naman that it's impossible to go zero emission.
Yeah, it's not about eliminating it, but then completely eliminating it, but then like what
Just
you
bringing
mentioned,
it down.
bringing it down, and also like offsetting it by having something that's a little healthier for the environment. Also, do something
Yeah.
of equal
Just
value, parang ganon.
yeah, just going low carbon, because we're quite extravagant that way.
Extravagant is a good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now okay, so the first thing that you would address to hopefully lessen the amount of carbon emissions here is public transport. What would be the next thing after that? Because like Metro Manila in itself, very um populous and very dense. So it's like and very concrete as well. So like
Mm.
what would be the next thing from public transportation? What would be the next thing that would be tackled, you think?
Is this for individual people, or like
It can be as a community as well.
as a community? I'm a re- I'm a really big fan of I'm a really big fan of Mother Nature, like I said. So I'm a
Mm-hmm.
planet Earth stan. So I really wish there would be more parks in the city.
Yes.
There'd be more
Yeah.
greenery. So for me, I would really like um, greenifying the streets or making it just walkable.
Right.
That would be second, I think, for me.
Yeah, I love that suggestion actually. That's one thing I've always like addressed to my parents or anybody who will listen really. Na parang, I wish we had more parks because it's like
Yeah,
we are so like it's such a communal place. A lot of people can like just like relax under a tree or have lunch in somewhere and it's not because like you'll feel so suffocated if it's like you're just like in a building or something but you need that's where the term breath of fresh air comes from. It's like ideally you would be somewhere where there's like a
correct,
tree or grass somewhere.
correct. Yeah, and also like, but there's so many other benefits to a tree. So it makes you calmer.
Yes,
So your
that's right.
mental health is a lot. Just seeing green will
Hmm.
refreshen up your mind. So that's one. Cleaner air, which
Yes.
we all need. It
Hmm.
helps. It helps when it's warm because it cools us down. But also it helps when it's raining because it can absorb
Yeah.
flooding. So
Right.
either way, there are only two seasons here. Either way, parang hindi ka walang talo when you plant trees.
That's so true. And yeah, I totally wish that there were more parks because it's really different diba? Like if you travel to another country or maybe even another region in the Philippines that has like greenery or like a park or something. It's iba yung feeling talaga. It's like you can actually breathe, you can relax, your heartbeat can slow down a little bit, even in the
Yeah,
midst of like, chaos or like traffic on the other end. It does wonders. So yes, I totally agree with the whole park thing. Like read a book or
yeah.
something. Diba? That would be so great.
Just being
Now,
near nature.
yeah, just being yeah, nature by the water, clean water sana, body of water. So I'm curious though, like with okay, so it's like we were so congested, or we still are congested even post pandemic. But during the pandemic, like, would you, when you started your journey as a climate journalist, were there stats that you found like during or maybe a year or two after the pandemic that maybe showed that it kind of we lessened our carbon emissions? Was that like, would you know if we were able to do that because we were all at home except for maybe frontliners?
Yeah, in the pandemic, yeah, it really there was a nosedive in our emissions. That was charts would show that.
Mhm.
However, we quickly regained it back. So parang the
Wala din.
wins baliwala.
It was good
Yeah.
while it lasted. Ganon.
Yeah. But like the good news, I think the good news that's worth um sharing is that so after the Paris Agreement, so the world was on track for like a 4-degree warming before Paris Agreement.
Mhm.
So imagine that's an inhabitable Earth, right?
Yeah,
It
right.
4 plus 4 degrees warming. But after the Paris Agreement, I think we're now for like maybe a 2.2, a 2.2 or yeah, or maybe a 2.6.
Mhm.
Still way high than the
Mhm.
2C limit, but at least it's lower, way lower than the original 4.4 that we were on track for. So
Yeah.
I think it's important to know that while there's still so much work to be done, we're also work is being done, right?
Mm.
We're it's not all doomsday. I think it's not a doomsday scenario.
Yeah, and I think that information should be more public no na parang yes, we are trying to aim for like net zero aka 1.5 degrees like lesser, tama ba?
Mm,
So
mm-mm.
but here's the thing, like we're down 2 degrees or something or with
Yeah.
some change from before the
The-
Paris Agreement. So it's like that. I feel like that needs to be like shouted at the rooftops to be like it's not all bad because it's like right climate change it brings such a it can be such a downer for
it
people to
is a
talk.
Debbie Downer, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. When I started, like I said, I started I think in 2021. I was pretty depressed because I that was like a barrage of news. Consistently every day you would hear about the wildfires in Greece, the
Mm-hmm.
wildfires in Spain. It was the 1 year anniversary of the sky turning orange in San Francisco. So it
Oh
was
yeah.
really, I was really beaten down by it. And then the offer came, hey, do you want to lead this? So it's like, oh, great, cool. I can do something about it. So I guess why am I sharing this? Oh, because really, I think it's correct what they say that the answer to depression is action. So
Mm.
when you feel the climate anxiety like in you, then all you have to do really is to do something, no matter how
Mm.
small, that
Yeah.
will cure you and give you hope.
And that's another thing also that I want to bring up because it's like, okay, what's one small thing that we can do? So maybe okay, at the top of my head, parang we're using paper straws, I guess, or we're not using straws anymore, which is something that I try to do. And then we also try and bring our own bags to grocery when we do our groceries, etc., etc. People might think of like, okay, I can do that, but then like thinking big picture, like what difference will it make? I'm just one person. So it's like, how do you reassure someone who has that kind of mindset na parang, if I'm the only one who's thinking like this, or if I'm the only one who's actually, I'm just one person, like what difference
Mm.
can I make?
um a lot.
How so? How so?
No, I think like another thing you can do, so from like apart from bringing your tumbler, your reusable bag, what we're actually doing is really good. Just simply talking about it with your friends, using your Instagram to talk about your journey into like a zero waste lifestyle, which is not correct, by the way. You're not expected to live a zero waste lifestyle, but like
Mm.
yeah, just talking about it will bring awareness to more people, and that is the difference you want to be making. You want to be
Mm.
creating more awareness, getting people to think and live more intentionally is a good thing.
Nice. Living intentionally over having a zero waste lifestyle. So, okay. You did mention this. No one is supposed to be living a zero waste lifestyle. Can we please expound on that? Because like there are gonna be a lot of these advocates that in the parang I've been recycling these blah 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 or like some basta they like they're doing their best to do zero waste, but the reality is you can't. But so why is that so?
I think people confuse it, or maybe climate deniers. No, but really, zero waste was not meant for a consumer. Was not meant for an individual person. Zero waste was created really for governments and big businesses to clean up their acts. So
Mm,
sila
okay.
dapat yung mag zero waste. So imagine a factory, 'di ba, all the fumes, yun dapat ang linisin nila. The waste that they produce from creating things that we will buy, yun dapat yung lilinisin. So sila dapat yung nagzi-zero waste. It's almost like
Uh,
a circular economy, di ba? That's
yeah.
now another buzzword. So that's
Yes,
what
right.
just it means. Like, you use the waste and paikot lang siya dapat. So,
Yeah.
hindi talaga dapat tayo yung magzi-zero waste. But if it's helping you with your climate anxiety, then why not?
If it's
right?
helping you lessen your carbon emissions, sige, go. I mean,
No,
as long as it doesn't stress you out to try and figure it out na rin.
correct,
It's
correct.
like, imagine
Yes,
it can be hard. Parang how can you do zero waste? Parang you're buying your like how do you do that like grocery shopping? You have plastic like that's wrapped
yeah.
around fruits and everything. So
Also, di ba parang your hygiene, paano ka mag-zero? Parang it's hard. So yeah, it's not for individual action. It's really for big businesses and big organizations. Zero
mm.
waste.
Now in your journey so far as a climate journalist, have you ever come across people who don't believe in climate change or when you spoke to them they just kind of shrugged at the idea. It's like, "Eh, anong magagawa mo?
No,
Wala mong magagawa." Oh, really? That's good. That's a good
I've been
sign.
lucky. I have been lucky. The nearest that I got was debunking EVs,
Ah, okay.
so electric vehicles,
Yeah.
saying that's not the solution. But then I was talking to a boomer, and it's really hard to be a boomer Republican. So
Got
it's hard to argue. So
yeah.
well, you just let them say their piece, and
Mm-mm.
there you go.
Yeah. That's true. It's like if they already are fixed or have you
Mm-mm.
sense na parang they have no intention of changing their mind, parang it's like, okay, there's no point in starting an
Yeah,
argument.
yeah, and then diba, when they go into the conversation, and you know that they're done, their minds are fixed, then parang
Mhm.
sayang naman, sayang naman yung
Energy
sayang
mo.
naman yung correct, di ba? Karoon ka pa ng kaaway instead of getting them into your team. So
Yeah.
you try to listen, and just that's it.
Yeah. Now, for those who might need concrete examples of how climate change manifests locally, because like we know the concept now, we know what it means, but then on a smaller scale, like as individuals going about our commute, going to work, etc., like what are the signs of high carbon emission of of living in the city?
Hmm. Like switching on your aircon because it's really so hot. And 'di ba? That's high. Taas na nun.
Mm-mm.
Pero 'di ba, again, you cannot be faulted kasi tas paano kung may heat stroke ka na? So parang you cannot be shaming people into forgoing their aircons or forgoing their comforts kasi that's all, it's already here, right? So you I feel like, I don't know, I feel like there might baguhin nila yung aircon nila, ewan ko, or lagay nila malapit sa puno
Invert.
para less power yung gagamitin niya. So
Mm-mm.
parang yun. I'm really just very careful in shaming people because I know things like air conditioning is really essential,
Yeah.
especially for those with health conditions.
That's true, actually. But even like for those, because like again, like we mentioned, like the weather has been so erratic and so extreme. Na parang it's
Mm.
so sometimes it's super humid and very hot. Na parang to the point that sometimes it's so hard. It's hard to breathe. Na parang with that temperature. So parang it's like you have no choice talaga. Na parang I choose survival, so I will switch
Yeah.
on the AC. Parang ganon.
Yeah, that's true. It's intense. But yeah, like you mentioned, what are the manifestations? I feel like what's going on like these days, parang the weird weather, super rainy in the morning, and then init, like what? We were having like a heat index of 42 recently. There's
Gosh.
been health warnings. I think this might be it. This is like a manifestation of climate change. It can only get worse, I
Oh my
think.
gosh, it can only get worse.
Yeah.
But I
If we
mean,
don't if we don't get our acts together, right? So
That's true. But also, like, I guess if you're living in the city, no, it's like, I think being surrounded by cement, like cemento, concrete,
mm,
diba? It's like,
mm-mm.
it makes it even hotter because I think, like, I heard you, like, in the podcast say na parang, because
Urban
the
heat.
yeah, the urban, like it makes it extra hot because cement doesn't really do anything. It just kind of, it's almost like ceramic. It
Absorbs.
yeah. And so we are the ones who like bear the brunt of extra warm days
Yeah.
also. And then
That's
add to that like the extra warm cars and like that are on the road and pretty much
yeah.
everything else that contributes to like carbon emissions in the city. It's there's so many things to address, like to really try and figure out. So that's why, and so it's understandable na parang it's a huge undertaking
Mm.
for a nation to do so. But then as long as there's really an effort to like try and mitigate that situation, I think, and to get everybody on board, sana that would be
Yeah.
siguro.
That's the dream. The
Diba?
Western Summit is the whole of nation approach. It
Yeah,
cannot just be the government or the businesses it has to be everyone. So
that's
that's
so
the
true.
challenge.
To convince everybody to change their mind or be more, what do you
Mm.
call this, to adapt to a new way of living. It's well, people are always resistant to change, so yeah, we're still there, we're still in that, we're still in those steps now. Um so what then can we do about it, like individually then? No, so for us to limit or lessen our carbon emissions, we like already gave some examples of like bringing our own water bottle or bringing our own canvas or tote bags also to do grocery shopping, and like not use straws. What are other examples na might be popular or actually might be new ways of thinking on how to reduce carbon emissions on an individual or yeah, solo level?
Yeah. Walk where you can. Take your bike where you can. Carpool with friends, right? So I think those are like really good and applicable things you can do. I just learned to bike in the pandemic as well.
You joined the community.
No, I'm not as hardcore as they are. Like
Okay.
I cannot commute yet, but like within my community, so if I need like to run errands where I used to take my car, now I just take my bike. So at least it's a lower carbon lifestyle, and strangely, running errands on a bike is so liberating and it's really joyful. So hindi ka na nagbabagnot na gagawa na naman ako ng ganito ganito ganito. So it's mas
Yeah.
masaya na siyang gawin. So that's
That's
those are really things you can do, I think.
right. And I like, of course, we just have to be careful on the road if we're gonna be biking that end, because there again
Yeah.
there's a whole debate about like, bike lanes and such. And so it's
Mm.
that's also something that needs to be addressed, but maybe discussed for another time. Bike.
Yeah.
Now, I like that you mentioned like you're using that to you're biking so that you can run errands. I started to walk home from work
Mm.
actually recently na rin. That's because walang AC yung kotse ko. Kaya so I was like, okay, I can't use the car.
Okay.
So yeah, but then I started walking home and then I realized that parang, okay, it only takes me about half hour at the most to get to walk home. It's like that's good steps to get
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, yeah. So I was gonna say, like, we keep complaining about how we need to lose weight, how and there's no time to exercise or go to the gym. But really, I feel like the solutions are already there.
That's true.
We just need to do it. So I think,
Mm.
that's cool that you mentioned walking.
Yeah.
I used to do that all the time too.
Because I would drive to work and it would be, and you would spend so much more time on the road, especially during rush hour going back
Mm.
home. Na para I realized para I'm wasting so much time and so much gas, I guess, and emitting so much carbon, I guess, like being
And
on the
money,
road
but it's so
and
expensive.
money. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
it's
there.
so there's a lot of solutions, monsters. If you guys are listening on how we can do that, you can. I'm sure you can Google it na rin, eh, but what are other small things that I can do to change my lifestyle to make it a little bit more environmentally friendly, so to speak. So
Mm.
I want to know though, like, okay, so there are these practices that we are trying to do, but are there some popular Save Mother Earth habits or practices that people do that are actually doing more harm than good, or wala naman?
Hmm. Oh, this one is new. I just learned about it. So remember, we kept saying how plastic bags, styrofoams are bad, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
have local government units that have banned plastics altogether.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's this like reusable, the really uso now, the reusable bags that,
Yeah.
but those are actually made of plastic.
Is it like recycled plastic or like brand new made?
Brand, brand new plastic. I parang
Oh,
I they're not the sturdy katya bags, like you
yeah.
know those things, parang paper.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually plastic. So those are what they call maladaptations, I guess. So we think,
Mm.
right? We think it will help us lead more environmentally friendly lives, but actually, no, they're not. So even yung mga takeout containers that you think are paper, that's actually also lined
Laminated.
with, yeah, lined with plastic. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I
we have to.
learned that I learned
Mhm.
that recently also na parang okay, this is but like because I have a small business but I was trying to find boxes na parang okay, but then I want to know if it's biodegradable, and then I looked at it. I researched on it, and then I found out that the shiny part of like the cardboard, it's actually laminated with plastic. So it's like,
Mm.
so do I put it in recyclable or biodegradable or something? Parang,
Right.
what a
Yeah. So yeah. So those things, I feel like they complicate our lives. I think it's a
mm,
lot more complicated now because, as the waste expert I was talking to said, at least sa plastic, it's just made of one material, whereas those boxes lined with plastic, aluminum, they're multi material, so it's also
yeah.
harder to recycle. So sabi ko,
Interesting.
"Ano gagawin natin?"
Yeah, or it's making it a little bit more complicated now at this point. I
Yeah.
also I also learned somewhere. I'm not sure if this is accurate, but I've heard it before. Na parang when making canvas bags, parang it's like it's good that it's reusable and that it's Stella and everything. But then there's actually huge water waste like as a result of making these canvas bags too. So it's not just like even plastic, it's like actually like the whole
Yeah.
of like climate change also, I guess, like it can also like wait, like water waste is
Use
also
up
such a huge
so
deal.
much resources. It uses
Yeah.
up so much resources. Yeah, that's correct. So it's parang, oh, what are we gonna do now? So
Yeah,
the
it's a bit of a medyo catch 22 na parang it's okay. You're trying to be environmentally friendly, but then you don't know, or like there are catches. There are catches to like the things that you're using as an alternative na rin. So very
yeah.
interesting this way of solving climate change actually. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
So it's really
So
not for an individual, diba?
yeah.
It's not, yeah, yeah. We need guidance from experts, from scientists, even policymakers, I think.
That's true because it just trickles down to us and parang okay, here's an alternative that we can use. Pero
Mm.
we can't if we find out na parang okay, this is laminated plastic pala eh.
Yeah.
Parang who are we gonna talk to about this na parang to help figure this out, diba?
But like
So
in my head, I'm thinking, is it baka baka the problem is how we scale things up too fast. We found
mm,
in the beginning, katya bags were like, oh, this is the solution. And then suddenly, all events that you go to, it's all katya bags. So I feel like it's the scaling up of things.
right.
Sometimes, para, wait, baka naman hindi kailangan ganun kabilis, ganun kalaki.
Mm, mm.
Baka maybe we need to be a little bit more modest. Again, we're very extravagant, I think. So maybe we need to downsize a little bit. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be all that bonga all the time.
Right. And so at least like everyone else can keep up with like, okay, are we sure? Are we sure this is like the right solution, the right
Right.
alternative that we're actually
Yes. 'Di ba parang have a think about it first. Like, wait, what is this solving? Is it just like a
Yeah.
new thing, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing with like things that are suddenly getting viral na rin eh. So we we tend to catch on real quick with these
Yes.
things. So yun lang
Yeah.
talaga. That's the problem. Now, um, why do you think then also? So Filipinos, you said like at least in our country, we are aware. We are aware of climate change, but why do you think it's difficult to adapt environmentally friendly practices or even like initiatives here in the Philippines?
Um, kasi kasi mahirap yung buhay dito. So, 'di ba, in the newsroom, what we say, "Balik ka sa bituka." So, kailangan we need to feed ourselves first before we think of climate change.
Mm,
So, I think that might be one of the reasons
mhm,
why, parang hirap tayo to adapt.
mm,
That's looking at it, in that perspective. And then I feel like in the other perspective, people are a little too comfortable to be caring. So they
mm,
have their aircon switched on. They're driven by chauffeurs in their cushy cars. So
mhm,
hindi nila maramdaman yung init, 'di ba? So I think it goes both ways.
mhm.
Yeah.
That's true. And so would you know though like okay, so it's hard to adapt or it's challenging but it's not impossible. But are there any national initiatives that you know of that were in our effort to lessen carbon emissions? Do we have some apart from like the recycling system, which I mean still has its challenges, but then in terms of carbon emissions as a whole, like as a nation, do we have something like that or not
Yeah,
yet?
I think there's a push for renewable energy at the moment, but that's like totally B2B, and it's that's an
Okay.
industry speak. But
Hmm.
like consumer wise, I know like new homeowners have started putting in solar panels into their homes, so at least that's a renewable energy that we
Hmm.
can easily get into. But yeah, I know that one. There's a push for renewables energy. Yeah.
Mm-mm. Okay. And what about um would you know like I don't know with your group chat siguro from Oxford or something, would you know if there are developing countries who are taking initiative in lessening carbon emissions, which we could possibly look into as like a benchmark or as a peg on like how we can go about it here?
Hmm. Parang parang none yet. Oh
None.
no, I need to do my readings. I'll check again.
No problem. I mean, it's fine. It's like, but I'm sure I mean, we're not the only country who's trying to figure that out din naman eh. So, based
Mm-mm.
on your research though, like which countries at the top of your head, I guess, are at the forefront of like decreasing their carbon emissions? We have that Paris agreement, but who which countries have upheld their end of the
Ah,
bargain?
yeah. Huh. You know what? I have not checked in a while, but COP28 is upcoming already in end November, early December. So I'll be checking, see who has been loyal and who has been good with their national determined contributions. That's what they call it,
Mm.
NDCs.
Ah,
Sorry, I have no
you
answers to that just yet.
no, it's okay. What about like a COP28? What is that actually?
So COP28, it's called Conference of Parties. That's what it stands for.
Mm.
That's where the Paris Agreement happened. So that's COP 21 back in 2015.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So every year, uh, these Conference of Parties, 196 nations, I think, come together to see and see where they're at, see what can be done, and there you go. This year is a little controversial because it's gonna happen in oh no in Middle East, like one of the I
Fossil
feel
fuel.
yep. I
Okay.
think if I'm not mistaken in Dubai, but I'm not. Yeah, I think it might be in Dubai. So it's a
Very
fossil,
interesting location.
right?
Yeah.
So that should be interesting. There must be a lot of stories there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good information to have. Well, in now with the whole like the reason why climate change is hard to talk about, like it's a Debbie Downer of a topic,
Mhm.
is because people always say there's a doomsday clock of like, up until this time, like this is when it's irreversible. When climate change is irreversible. And I've seen like documentaries about that also. And it really does spark like some fear when you're
Mm.
watching it, because it's like, okay, then what happens then? Because like the net zero goal is until 2050. My
Mm.
question is like, what happens if we don't reach it by 2050, like 2051? Are we still here? Are we in a dystopian situation?
I don't know. That's the thing, di ba? Parang we don't know. That's why we really have to work at it. See what,
Mm-mm,
di ba? See what we can do and do it.
mm-mm.
Kasi kakatakot.
Yeah. And is it 2050, I'm sure that was calculated by scientists or something.
Yeah,
Okay, this is the threshold that we
yeah,
have up until
yeah.
this point. So from the readings that you've had, is it looking good? Like the window is closing, yes, but then is it looking good so far with our 2.6 that you mentioned?
Uh, no, it's not.
Oh, okay.
Kasi I think the Paris Agreement said well below 2C, preferably 1.5.
Hmm.
We're now at 1.1. So so there's really, yeah, the window is closing. That's what the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, said last March when they put out their new report. So
Hmm.
the window is really closing. So galing nga the way the solutions that they put forward, I thought that was very lifestyle. So they mentioned food consumption, they mentioned transportation, they mentioned shopping. So I thought, hey, this is all lifestyle. We need more lifestyle reporters here in the room because it's gone down to that level. It's gone down to the consumer. It's gone down to the individual.
Yeah, and I want to know now actually, because so you're managing editor right
Mm.
now, and you are trying to combine your skills or experience as a lifestyle writer and kind of what you call that, blend that into your climate journalism. So what kind of content then, if it's in terms of lifestyle, do you put out there that is in relation to climate change?
So I do a lot of I I've been keeping tabs on the refilling method. So it's like shopping. So that's like another example of a circular economy. So
Yeah.
I've been keeping tabs on that and reporting on it. Surprisingly, a lot of our readers are into it. So at least people are aware, people know their solutions. I think that's cool. I just wish it would more sari stores. It would be a little bit more accessible. This refilling thing. I feel like we can really make a lot of change in with that. So that's one way. Another way, I've been reporting on artists. This is in the arts and culture who bring in the climate change discussion into their works of art. So
Mhm.
that's cool too because these are like who would have thought like you'd get information about climate change inside museums or galleries. So
Mm.
like I feel like you have to reach people where they are. So if they are in galleries and museums, then that's cool. So that's another way. Increasingly, uh, I've been encountering climate change and sports stories as well.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, right. So there's something about FIBA, how if there's a massive typhoon in Japan, then they'll have to hold the FIBA games here in the Philippines. So I feel like hey, people should be looking into this because that's a climate story and it's already affecting sports. So it can
Ah, I
only
see.
affect sports more in the future, right? So
That's true.
that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's all interlinked. I think you mentioned in the podcast like it's not just a like climate change isn't like a single desk kind
Yeah.
of
It's
story.
not a
Like it's all
it's not a
encompassing.
it's not a beat, right?
Yeah.
It's really it's an angle. So it's an angle. How are you going to, like, especially for food security, right? You,
Yes.
you're
So
eating in restaurants and all these, the flu and the salmon from whatever. Hala, high
yeah.
carbon, loka lang. But 'di ba, parang pag wala na yung pagkain, ano nang gagawin natin?
Mm-mm.
How do we do all these restaurant openings, or like flying in
That's
your
true.
oysters and your salmon?
Yeah. I mean it's true. I mean, but there are also electric ships, boats now. Who knows? Maybe in a larger scale, they'll be able to figure that out as well. I think it was
Mm-mm.
Greta Thunberg. She was able to go to that summit on a
Yeah.
boat,
Yes.
something like that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
found a way. So
Correct. Yeah, it's never too late.
yeah,
People
that's
are
so
always looking for solutions. They're helpers. So
true. Hmm.
that's
And
cool.
so it's only like a matter of time to also make that not just be aware and start practicing it, but when it becomes available, that it becomes accessible and maybe a little bit more affordable. Because usually like if it's something that's like electric or less carbon emission, somehow it's a little bit more
Expensive.
expensive. So
Yeah. So that's the story with ano, right? Solar panels. It used to be so
mm,
expensive, but these days, like, oh, okay, you can mapag-iipunan mo siya. It's
there's a
not
trade-off naman. Yeah.
No, and it's not as expensive. I thought it was going to be in the millions, but then when I was doing the story about solar panels, it's not in the millions.
Mm,
It's a lot cheaper actually than you think. So hindi siya impossible, because
yeah.
especially with the evolution of science, parang
Mhm.
technology keeps getting better and better and cheaper too. So that's a cool thing.
Yeah, and then I like that you're shifting the mindset na rin, 'di ba? Like what you mentioned, solar panels. You thought it cost this much, but in reality, it you can manage. You
Yeah.
can manage to
Yeah,
afford.
yung mapag-iipunan mo siya, it's almost like bumiyahe ka papuntang Europe, parang gano'n. So, 'di ba
Yun.
kaya, kung nakakabiyahe ka
Kakayanin,
papuntang Europe, kaya 'yun.
kakayanin.
Yeah.
No, okay. So we are nearing the end of the show, but if there's one thing, Lou, that we can take away, or listeners and viewers can take away from this show tonight, what would you like to impart? Maybe as like closing remarks. Closing remarks.
Closing
Like,
remarks.
as like maybe one final thought for this evening
Oh,
about.
no, it's not the end. Like, there's always something we can do, and I feel like we should just do it. Start somewhere.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
That's true. And that we don't give up in like trying to figure out ways also, because even if that window is closing, we're still human beings. We figure out ways. We found
Mm,
vaccines like in the nick of time.
correct.
So who knows what
Correct.
happens? So there we go. That is it, monsters. Thank you very much for keeping it locked this evening on Heard on Thursdays. I was speaking to Lou Albano, who is an environmental, I keep thinking activist. She's not. Environmental advocate and the climate journalist also, who spoke to us about climate change and what we can do about it, and maybe the current situation also that we find ourselves in, especially living here in Manila. Now, don't forget to follow us on our Monster socials. You know where to find us at RX931. And catch me again next week. Might have another. Yes, we will definitely have another guest next week. But for now, keep it locked only here on the